A solder bridge here, as you can see. This was caused by putting too much solder across the LED. I've already clipped the LED leads and I'm just showing this for example purposes, but let's say you didn't clip them yet, or if you already clipped them and you put the battery in and the LED doesn't turn on. If you look closely and you see a solder bridge where the plus and the minus of the LED, the two legs of the LED are touching, this is what it looks like, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. One option is to just use the soldering iron itself. So if you just kind of put it on there and kind of wick or separate away the solder, hopefully you'll get enough of it, as I just did there, where there is no more bridge. Now you can test that by putting the battery in and seeing if the LED turns on, flipping it over and seeing that the LED does in fact turn on now. Now I'm going to make another solder bridge just by putting on a lot of solder, and alright, so we've got a lot of solder on there now. Now let's say for some reason this is too much solder. It may be too much solder to try and get off with a soldering iron alone. We have two tools that we can use. One is the solder sucker or solder vacuum, shown here. So the solder sucker has a button on it that releases the spring-loaded piston that creates a vacuum, and when you place that close to molten solder and suck it up or press the button, it will actually suck the solder into the tube inside of the solder vacuum. So I'm going to show you how that works. So you're going to first melt the solder and make it molten, and then hold the vacuum close and suck it up. Now you can do this a few times and you'll notice every time you squeeze it out, a little bit of solder actually comes out. So we're going to melt it again, even though I've already got the joint done, and suck it up. So now if we visually inspect this joint, you can see that there's no more solder bridge. And again, you can test that by putting the battery in. The final tool that I want to show you is solder wick. The way that this works, it's a lot of strands of copper or some other metal, and these strands will actually wick up the solder away from the joint. So it'll actually suck the solder into these strands, and that way you don't have to worry about the solder being in your way. So I'm going to put another bridge across here just by melting the solder. So let's say you made a mistake and you have this bridge here and you want to get rid of it. You just press the solder wick on top of the joint and press your soldering iron against it, and it will start to wick away the solder underneath there. Now the solder wick is conductive, it's metal like I said before, so it's going to get hot, so you want to be careful and aware of that. So as you just hold it on there, it should wick away the solder. Solder wick is actually mostly useful for really fine jobs where you have very, very close solder joints. So for something like this, again, I would recommend the solder vacuum. But as you can see here, with this, where all the solder went inside of the solder wick, it actually sucked the solder into the wick and wicked it away from the board. So you can see all the solder, excess solder is there. So those are the tools, troubleshooting tools, in case you make a mistake. It's pretty easy to fix, and I encourage you to play around with them if you have them, and learn how to solder.